Here's a genus that we did talk about before. We talked about it in Malvaceae. So this also previously was in a different family, Tiliaceae, and lately it's been lumped in the larger Malvaceae, the mallow and chocolate family, and so on. And it's got some characteristics of Malvaceae, so a little more emphasis toward palmate venation, although this is maybe not so drastically palmate venation. Nicely maybe more illustrated here. Kind of a cordate heart-shaped leaf, and they also tend to have these asymmetrical leaf bases sometimes, but the big lobes at the base, these overall heart shape to the leaf, is pretty helpful for basswoods. So linden or basswood. Flowers kind of reminiscent of Malvaceae, lots of stamens, although not so united around the style as we saw in Malvaceae, the bigger sense Malvaceae. And then the flowers are arranged on these branches that have big bracts associated with them. So from flowering all the way to fruiting, they've got this really big bract that's a different color, different size, shape from the standard photosynthetic leaves. And it's associated with a little panicle of collection of flowers and then these keen fruits. And as they disperse, they actually use this bract as a parachute to kind of twirl around and get their seeds dispersed in that way. So this feature pretty distinctive and pretty reliable through most of the growing season as well. Here's one, the ash. Ash is another one. We saw the maples have opposite phyllotaxis. Here are the ash that have opposite phyllotaxis. This combination of pinnately compound leaves and opposite phyllotaxis would set it apart from, we saw in Juglandaceae, they had pinnate compound leaves, but those were alternate. We haven't seen too much that has opposite phyllotaxis anyway. So opposite phyllotaxis with compound leaves, pretty helpful for this one. Genus is Fraxinus, or common name is ash. And this one actually is in the olive family. So this is the same family as commercial olives, Oleaceae. And this is one of our genus that we have quite a few species of. And flowers are pretty reduced. There's not so much to notice about them, except maybe their overall structures here. But when it comes to the fruits are pretty helpful to identify. They are samaras, so they've got a winged portion here. Draw that out for us. They got kind of a teardrop wing. And then this portion would be the seed proper. So seed contained in that region, and then the wing extended farther out to give it a little more of a boost when the wind blows to disperse those seeds. And lots of them produced together here. So also plants that are dioecious. So there's female plant producing the samaras, female plant in flower, male plant with flowers, and then wind pollination, as we've seen. So lots of really big anthers here to produce lots of pollen for the wind pollination, and then big stigmas here to collect the pollen. And this group, actually this whole genus of ash, is receiving a lot more attention now because it is under attack, really. So we have this non-native insect. This is a beetle known as the emerald ash borer. And its name tells you that it bores its way in through the bark and lays eggs. And it's the larvae that chew the living portion of the plant in between the bark and the wood is the living part of the plant that conducts the water and the sugars up to the leaves and down to the roots. And they just go to town on that and they chew it all up. And that destroys the plant's ability to basically connect the above ground and below ground portions, and that ends up killing the tree. And they're very effective. So this emerald ash borer has been sweeping through, as you can see on the map here. And it's really just no end in sight, as far as we can tell. It's been just decimating populations of ash. These are plants that were sometimes planted in urban areas as street trees, sometimes are wild versions, and just everything alike has been really just under siege by this terrible animal that's come through. So I have a few maps here. This one is one of the first I grabbed from 2013. The blue line there is a quarantine boundary. So if you want to take a time machine back to 2013, this was a kind of a new presence in Wisconsin, and people were worried about it spreading through. And as you can see, certainly justified in that. So 2 years later, 2015, Bottom half of Wisconsin, southern half of Wisconsin, now in that quarantine zone. 2016, 2017. By 2019, the whole state is basically, there's no safe area without the emerald ash borer in Wisconsin. So they've been very effective. As I said, they've just killed trees in cities, in natural environments, and it's kind of an open question as to what the future is going to hold for ash trees in North America. They can be defended using insecticides. You can basically soak your ash trees in insecticide. It's kind of prohibitive to do that to a large number of ash trees, but if you had a particular ash tree you wanted to save, some people have been able to hold off the invasion on single trees and maybe wait until if the food runs out, maybe these animals will stop being so abundant. One more year here. So 2021, the map gets bigger and starts expanding out. We'll see what the future holds. Mulberry, here's one more for us. This is another member of Rosales. So we saw the elms were in this larger order, hackberries, mulberries now also in the, shoot, I say that right? Sorry, I had to check that for a second. This is, yes, in the Rosales group, along with some of our other notable woody plants. Alternate leaves. And one of the features of leaves, these are rather distinctive, are mulberries in being lobed sometimes and sometimes not. So you can find a mulberry tree that is barely lobed. So you might have a tree where all of its leaves look kind of like this one. You might not even really notice the presence of lobes. There's a little bit of a notch in there, kind of hinting at what could be. And then the irregularly lobed, this is kind of highlighted here, where one side of this leaf is perfectly fine with no lobes. The other side, 1, 2, 3 lobes on there. And then heading down to different parts of this plant, you've got lots and lots of lobes. So if you're familiar with kind of a fig leaf, sometimes these are in artistic illustrations. This is the same family, Moraceae, as figs. And so this lobing is kind of reminiscent of that. Sometimes our mulberries have these deeply lobed leaves, sometimes barely lobed. So you can't rely on the lobes as something reliable to identify them with, but useful. So this is the genus Morus. It's the genus that gives the name to Moraceae. This is the mulberries. And these are dioecious, and they've got just little spikes of flowers. So female flowers on the left, male flowers on the right. Flowers on their own, maybe not too distinctive. They're highly reduced. So these female flowers, there's really nothing to see except an ovary and 2 big stigmas. There's actually a little bit more to it, as illustrated nicely here. Turns out that the fruit of a mulberry, so as these develop, they start as a separate female flower. This is a cluster of female flowers. So each one develops into its own fruit. And if we treat one of these things as a mulberry, then that makes it a multiple fruit. So this family Moraceae, the fig family, the breadfruit family, jackfruit family, is a collection of multiple fruits in this family. This is one of them. So it's quite similar in appearance to a blackberry, but the way it's made is very different from a blackberry. So you can see actually the fruit type technically is an achene. So the ovary becomes an achene, and the fleshy part of this, a little bit reminiscent of what we saw in Rosaceae, the fleshy part is coming from accessory tissues. So you can see here the sepals, kind of obscure in the flowering version we saw here. This green bit here is kind of these fleshy sepals. That actually grows out and becomes the flesh surrounding the achene. So kind of an interesting way to put your fruit together if you are a mulberry.